Well, that was an abrupt stop. Howdy, y'all. Today is December 1, and that means it is National Cookie Cutter Day. I'm Paul Thompson. This is My Project Hell, where for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to throw out the corporate lingo and just talk some no-nonsense project management. Now, as you might have guessed, Kelly is not able to make it. She had a client conflict, but she is here in spirit, and through the magic of video, will be presenting her discussion with a very special guest. And also, this is really almost the episode that didn't happen. And I think we learned a lot of project management lessons that we'll talk a little bit more about after the video's over. So Katie, if you want to start it up, why don't we do our video interview?
Hello, my Project Hell listeners. I'm missing my right-hand partner today. Paul's dealing with a power outage due to a fall storm that just moved through here. So we're having this interview anyway. And even though I'm flying solo today on this episode without Paul, we're together in our commitment to continue bringing you some good advice, some solid advice on project management topics that add value to your own practice. So in today's episode, the show must go on, and we have a special guest with us, Rob Petley-Jones. Rob is the Director of Professional Services at Helm Operations Software Company. This is one of the leading providers of marine operations software in the transportation sector globally. So Rob, welcome to My Project Hell.
Hello.
Very happy to have you here as our
Very happy
our
to be here.
Yeah. Our victim today in this episode. You can just imagine like either the angel of Paul or the devil of Paul on one of my shoulders.
All right.
Hopefully I'm not going to channel the devil one, but so let me just take a few minutes to tee our audience up for this discussion that we're going to have for the next 20 minutes. So in the past, just to give you a little history, we've focused on the project manager perspective of managing vendors as a part of everyday project management. You know, you get assigned to a project and maybe you've got some vendors in the mix that you've got to manage as you're part of the scope. But today, Paul and I thought it would be a nice, different, fresh perspective to look at it through a different lens from the perspective of the vendor doing the work and what's unique to you as the vendor on the vendor side about project managing implementations.
For sure.
So that's what we've got you roped in here today.
Awesome. Well, I'll answer as best I can.
Okay, so the first thing that I've been wanting to ask you, and I know Paul did too, because we were talking about, what are we going to ask Rob? What types of challenges does your team of implementation PMs come across when working with various clients? I imagine you've got challenges just like the rest of us. What do those look like?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of varied challenges. I'd say some of the biggest challenges that we face are things like lack of ownership. Someone doing a job off the side of their desk, like, somebody from that sort of just got it on the client side, got sort of shoved in their lap and they've got to do this. And so they're doing the role of the PM, but they're not a PM, or they're, not fully bought in. But things like that. No clear escalation path, like not having a good connection to the sponsor or to the executive leadership at the client side. Other issues we see, like sometimes, like, and maybe this is something that you guys are pretty familiar with, but like when people bring in a third-party project manager, sometimes there's no connection between the project manager and the business. That can be a little bit challenging as well.
Yeah.
Because they've brought in this stranger, and the people at the other people at the client side business like don't really know who that person is, don't trust that person, or haven't worked with them yet. So sometimes not having a connection between the project manager and the business is a challenge. Also, like just things like unrealistic expectations on the customer side of like what the system should do, how the project should be, the way that the project should be going, deliverables, milestones, things like that.
Sure. The usual, the usual
Yeah,
stuff.
the usual.
Well, so can we unpack some of those challenges a little bit? I mean, it's
Yeah,
obvious
for
like
sure.
someone just gets it dropped in their lap and they're what I like to call it accidental project manager,
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
do the best they can with what they have. But what about when there's not an escalation path, a clear escalation path? And do you have some dicey, exciting examples you could share?
I mean, exciting I can't really use any specific
Well,
examples, but yeah,
not naming any specific clients, but perhaps
for
what,
sure.
I think that's a really a big missing piece a lot of times is there's issues and then a big
Yeah,
question mark hanging over what do we do next and how do you plow through that?
I've definitely had we've had a number of projects where the client side PM, there's no like you mentioned, there's no escalation point, or we found that there's no real escalation point. And like when something's dropped in somebody's lap, typically what I see is like week after week we're doing status meetings and they keep coming to the status meeting and literally nothing on their side has moved, right? Like they come and you're reading through the status and they're almost treating it like, oh, it's a reminder of what I was supposed to do. So when we see that, like you you basically need to find an escalation path. Like what I'll do is I'll go through like the salesperson, something like that, to the person who bought the system, and try to find someone in the organization to sort of bring a little bit more engagement. You know, in my opinion, that's probably the best thing to do, and sort of the only real path forward in that sort of a situation. Like, I mean, executive buy-in, obviously, as you know, is probably one of the biggest success factors in a project.
Sure.
So, I mean, we've gotten really good now at setting expectations during the sales process. You know, we talk about project management during the sales process. I try to make sure that, you know, the customer's clear the expectations that are going to be on the project manager. And, you know, it's something that I also include actually in any statement of work that I send out as a roles and responsibilities sort of breakdown of like, you know, project manager is expected to do this, 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 and this, and try to, you know, be as clear with that, and then, you know, make sure that we identify the sponsor ahead of time. But in the unlikely event that we do find ourselves in the project and we're not, you know, seeing that engagement, that's sort of the first thing that I would do, would be try to find the sponsor or the executive that can help push it along.
Yeah, and then so that's got me thinking too that some of these escalations are probably centered around customizations or the ways that maybe the project team they want the system to work a certain way, or the end users, but that costs money, as everyone knows. So how do you balance the professional services goals of within your company and managing the customer with these wish lists that we see with companies?
Yeah, so I would say like I'm pretty lucky in that sense that Helm is a SaaS, it's like a SaaS-based software. So we sell an out-of-the-box software package that we don't actually advertise any customizations or anything like that. Like when we meet with a customer during the sales process, they may have feedback, but we, you know, we're in a situation where we say, here's how the software works now. This is what we're going to have to use. You know, down the road, it's, you know, possible if there's a market need that, you know, they will get that feedback or we'll put that feedback into the system. But like in terms of managing wish lists, I think you just need to be as upfront as possible. You know, I see no problem with a very long wish list if it was like a long customization list that you set up. You've got money behind it, you've got the scope set. I don't really see that as a big problem. It's where the expectation isn't there and you're in the project and you know, people start making demands around different, you know, functionality that needs to be in the system. We actually have one customer right now, obviously won't name them, but there's one project where the statement of work signed, they bought the software, but in the first meeting, I was chatting with their project manager and they're like, yeah, we want to get it in front of our users and see where the gaps are. And first thing I did, I stopped the meeting right there. I said, this is not, you know, during the project is not the place to find the gaps. We should be looking for the gaps before we actually really kick things off and see what we can do so that we're not derailed down the road. And that's still an ongoing situation, but I really think due diligence at the start of the project is the key to managing wish lists and making sure, if there is a big wish list, that you're getting paid to fulfill that, or and managing scope from there.
So this seems like a good segue to talk about if there is a project manager on the on client side versus not having a PM. So, but it sounds like even if the client does have a PM in place, they can still be a little off the rails with managing requests or asking for things that where you have to pull back and level set. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, like, is there a PM versus not a PM? I mean, that is not really an issue that we see very often. I would say, like, with smaller projects, yeah, I think you can get by with somebody doing it off the side of their desk. Like if we're just doing a small implementation or something like that, where the person who's managing it is the subject matter expert, I'm also okay with that, but with larger projects, to be honest, I don't think we've had a project in which a PM is not assigned, which is
Okay.
probably
Okay.
lucky on our part. But again, like I mentioned, it's setting expectation during the sales process. Really, before the sale happens, making sure you sit down and say, hey, here are the key roles you're going to have to fill. Here's an expectation of, how many hours that person, or whatever, like how many hours per month or per week or whatever that person will need to dedicate to the project, and being clear up front. And you mentioned there was a second part to that question. Can you repeat that?
Oh, I was just curious, the differences between not having a PM and having a PM, and if the project is more likely to go sideways without one.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you don't have very many instances where the client's not providing either their own internal person, whether they're doing that off the side of their desk, or maybe
Yeah.
they're hiring a consultant to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, like I said, like I do think without solid project management, you are going to end up with a higher probability of failure. Communication is, I mentioned executive sponsorship earlier. I'd say communication is like the number 2 thing that you really need to nail. So without a PM on their side, without somebody who really knows how to manage stakeholders on their side and bridge the communication between different areas of the project, I'd say it's definitely, there's more difficulty. And like those smaller projects that I mentioned, where I may just have one person on my side, just an implementation or a trainer, and they'll be sort of doing the role of the PM, and same with like the subject matter expert on the customer side. With a client of that size, or with a project of that size, it's typically okay. It's just you don't need to, I don't think there's a need to over manage every situation, but with a large formal project, I can't imagine going forward without somebody designated project manager.
So that makes sense. And also I'm wondering, and I think our listeners might be too, getting into kind of the core of our conversation is the expectations, or the nice to haves and the must haves for a client PM that you're working with. And what are those? What does that look like to you?
If there was like an ideal, I would say, for a project manager, like maybe this isn't on the individual themselves so much as making sure that the project manager on the client side has a mandate from the business, has executive backing. I've said this again and again. It's just because I think these are the most critical things. I would definitely, as I mentioned before, sometimes if there's a third party project manager involved, like making sure that that person has a connection to the actual end user, the people on the ground, has a relationship with those people, has the respect of those people. And definitely like the quality of the project manager themselves. Like I definitely love working with people that take things on proactively work to get those things done. I think there's a bit of a challenge sometimes when there's an over, like people are too formal in their project management processes. I really think people just need to know how to get things done. I don't think
Okay, so
things
what do you mean by that? Too formal? What does that look like to you?
like every little change comes with a change control note, or like every request needs to go through a formal process with a steer co or things like that. I
Even the
find it's
little things like it's just any change is going to go through this big convoluted,
yeah,
or not
exactly. Like
convoluted, but staged
people that,
process.
I'm almost going to sound hypocritical here, but like I mentioned managing scope really carefully. I think that there's certain scope that needs to be managed and certain scope that can sort of go through in the, in order to keep the project moving. And yeah, I feel like sticking to an incredibly formal process can sometimes be a little bit, it can slow things down. It can make it, more difficult to work with a client. It can bring up some frustration. Like I try to keep formal changes to the larger, more significant things, and just sort of work together to resolve smaller things.
Yeah, I'm working on a client myself right now where the um, the business knows there's going to be changes. They're expecting it because the end users were going through workflows right now and documenting requirements, but they don't know what they don't know, and a lot of people need to see. They need to see to the point of your previous example with the PM that's like, can we see it and find the gaps? But I know
Yeah.
it doesn't work like that, but we almost have to like get the most requirements we can and then get it built and demo it, and then we know when we're going to be going through the demos that things are going to come up, and maybe not all of them need a change request.
For sure.
Those
Sometimes,
tweaks.
like for the relationship, you just need to say, hey, you know what? We'll get that done for you. Maybe put it in the email to formalize it. Like, hey, here's a thing
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to do for you. Put it in the email. Say, we're not going to worry about, the change control note or charging you for this. We're just going to, make sure that we've got sign off from you via email or something like that, and then go forward with it.
So what would you say are maybe the top 2 or 3 things that you wish client project managers would do differently or better in working with your implementation PMs? Top 2 or 3 pain points for you, that how would you summarize?
Mm, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, like having a PM who really, I mentioned one of the challenges earlier was, when you have like a client PM say, or they're doing it off the side of their desk, or they're just not very effective, where they come to the status meeting every week. And it's almost like you're reminding them as you go through the status. What I would really like, I would say that what I wish or what I want client PMs to be doing or to do differently is to, really come each meeting with the next step already sort of dealt with on their side. Not just coming to the meeting, getting a reminder and saying, oh yeah, okay, I'll follow up and, you know, um, I'll follow up and get back to you next week. It's like at that point, you've already lost multiple weeks, right? Like
Yeah.
you might as well take it away from what I would need them to, what I really want them to do is take it away, action it right away, and even come to with an answer before the status meeting. Like just being really engaged, I think is one of the most critical things. Another really big challenge that when we do have things like new statements of work or change control notes, one place where I see a lot of delays is when you send those things to the customers, to the client side, and they don't actually have, they don't have the authority to get it signed, and they don't have a good connection with the person who has that authority. So like, I would really hope as a client PM that you have a good relationship with the person that holds the money, that holds the purse strings, and that you're able to push through changes or things as they, like major changes as they come up quite quickly, so that things don't get derailed there.
Yeah, I hear you. I think a lot of PMs don't have that close connection with the CFO or the controller, right? Who's
Yeah.
managing costs. Well,
Yeah, I'm actually working a project right now where every time a new statement of work has to be signed, it's like over a month delay, no matter what. And it's kind of like every couple of days you just chiming in like, hey, any movement on that? And it's like there's no answer, or there's no movement, or and then a month later they come back with all this feedback, and it's like, okay, well, now we've lost 6 weeks of time on this where we could have been moving forward on it.
Well, it sounds like it takes all the steam out of agility.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on our episode today and just sharing that. It sounds like being proactive, communicative, responsive, and they're the same things that, we like our vendors to be, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So,
And that's the standard that I hold myself to as a vendor PM, or we hold ourselves to, right? Is we never want to be holding the ball. We want to be waiting for the ball to come back, even if sometimes you're waiting longer, but as long as it's not on us, that's sort of the goal.
Right.
And I would say, yeah, as a PM, just make sure that you have a strong connection to, the person that does have the authority to make, major decisions, things like that in the project. Because I think if you find yourself sort of on your own as the PM, it's probably a bit of a red flag that needs to be resolved right away.
All right. I think that's a great thought to end with. I want to tell you how much Paul and I appreciate you joining us today and sharing your insights.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Our listeners appreciate information like this. It's very helpful for them on their project management career journey. So,
well, I hope it was helpful.
Caveats are always good to understand. Oh, definitely. It was. Thank you, Rob.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, always keep your stakeholders engaged. That's good regardless of what side you're on. I did want to let you guys know though, right? We had a great lesson for this being the episode that almost wasn't, that I want to pass back to everybody that I reminded myself of. So just quick background was, this episode, you can see I wasn't able to make it. Kelly's not here today. Rob had to be remote. We had a lot of challenges to the point where, power went out on my side and then couldn't find a place to go. But what it reminded me of is so much on projects is about assessing the situation, remaining calm, looking at your alternatives, right? Kelly and I just quickly jump on the phone. Hey, I don't have power. How can we solve this? We bounce back and forth with ideas. I went and tried to check out, okay, let's see if WeWorks can get me in, things like that. But it was that continual communication and not losing our heads that really allowed us to kind of in the moment make decisions and just keep walking this process forward until we finally reached the end. And Kelly did the interview, videotaped it, recorded it. And since she couldn't be here today, I took on this part of our discussion and kind of managing the show. So think about that the next time you're faced with a lot of challenges, right? And things are coming at you fast. Just take a few moments to breathe, settle in, and think about your options, walk down the trail, and really just keep communication open. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show for all that. I know Kelly and I, while this one might have been a bit messy, we have a lot of fun doing these. So please join us next time where we're going to continue the discussion on project management. Also, if you need to catch up on any of our episodes, look at our YouTube channel. And if you'd ever like to join and participate in Coach's Corner, drop us an email at myprojecthell@gmail.com. All right. Thank you all.